Assalamu alaikum and hello to my non-Muslim viewers. So recently there's been some drama with David Wood and Yasir Qadhi. So Yasir Qadhi said some things that caused some embarrassment. I mean, he's trying to do some damage control to rectify that situation. It's kind of like how when James White says embarrassing things and then tries to do damage control to control the situation, like when James White was utterly humiliated and embarrassed by Bart Ehrman. He tried to justify, bringing the Quran into their debate, and when Bart Ehrman basically slapped him for bringing that up, James White immediately jumped up and down and tried to do some damage control. Same thing with Yasir Qadhi. Yasir Qadhi says some things against the Quran's preservation, saying the Quran's preservation, the story of the Quran's preservation has holes in it, or the Quran's not preserved, or it's not. The Quran's not what we think. The story of the Quran's preservation is not true because Western academics say X, Y, and Z, and things like that. So basically, Yasir Qadhi is saying that the Quran isn't preserved or things like that. So let's hear a clip. This clip is from David Wood's video. Let's hear what Yasir Qadhi has to say about the Yasir Qadhi's comments on the Quran, which is causing controversy, not only amongst the Muslims but amongst the Christians too. So let's hear what Yasir Qadhi has to say.
Viewers only knew two things. One, there are all kinds of problems with the standard Muslim story about the history of the Quran. And two, if Sheikh Yasir Qadhi had any solutions, you weren't getting them without taking his class.
When you do a deep dive is when things get very, very awkward and difficult. The most advanced of our scholars, they're not quite fully certain how to solve all of the unanswered questions in there. After we get off this phone call, me and you, let's have a number of discussions, no problem. Beyond this, honestly, I have no problem. We'll have a discussion or take my class.
Not surprisingly, those of us who believe that Muslims need to hear the truth about their corrupt book started sharing clips from that interview. I first saw some clips on the Islam Critiqued channel, but very soon everyone was discussing Sheikh Yasir Qadhi's demolition of the Quran. Muhammad Hijab received so many complaints from Muslims that he deleted the discussion from his channel. Yasir Qadhi backtracked and pulled the Islamophobia card on his Facebook page. After a recent interview with Brother Muhammad Hijab, some missionaries and anti-Muslim propagandists have read their own prejudice into our very brief discussion. Some of them have twisted my words to suit their agenda. While Muslim scholarship has pioneered Quranic studies for centuries and continues to do so, the fact remains that we all agree on the demonstrably proven fact that the Quran has been preserved in its entirety, word for word, and that we believe that all of the 10 recitations, qira'at, of the Quran are revealed from Allah. To see such Islamophobes try to read in an argument that no one amongst us ever made in order to prove their incorrect narrative is only demonstrating the unethical tactics they resort to. That's right, we were twisting his words when he said that there are holes in the narrative.
And it's very clear to you and to every single very advanced student and specialist that the standard narrative has holes in it. That's what I'm going to say.
We were twisting his words when he repeatedly warned Muhammad Hijab that they shouldn't be discussing the preservation of the Quran in public.
And I would never bring it up in public. And I don't think it is wise to bring it up in public. Why didn't I say it? Because it should not be said in public. You will not find one lecture of mine about this issue. It should never be brought up in public. This is not something you discuss amongst the masses, ya akhi. It's not wise.
We were twisting his words when he compared the Islamic view of the history of the Quran to the emperor in the emperor's new clothes.
When you go to academia, they don't have that red line. And they're going to just, the famous story of the emperor with no clothes. They're going to just point out, no, that doesn't make any sense. Well, that's not true, and this and that. And they'll bring issues, which I'm not going to mention explicitly, that you know are true because they're in your own books. They're not inventing anything new.
Okay, so that's Yasir Qadhi's. That's what Yasir Qadhi has to say here. Now the whole drama between David Wood and Yasir Qadhi, because let's face it, this is just high school level type of drama. I mean, high school drama is the world James White and David Wood live in. But anyways, David Wood or basically Yasir Qadhi, uh, submitted a copyright complaint to YouTube saying that YouTube should take down the video that David Wood put up. Now, this is the only part where I will agree with David Wood that David Wood has the right to put that video or that clip of that video on his YouTube channel. That I agree, because it's within the fair use paradigm, or it's within the fair use space, right? So whenever I use Bart Ehrman clips and clips from other Christian apologetic websites and stuff like that, like Islamic Critique and stuff, like I never got any copyright complaints. So, David Wood shouldn't get any copyright complaints for using Yasir Qadhi's video. That I agree. I agree that Yasir Qadhi is kind of out of line when he tries to go after David Wood for putting his video on his channel. That I agree. David Wood has the right to put that video on his channel and use it to whatever way he wants. That I agree. The issue here is that David Wood is trying to say, I think what David Wood is trying to say, and other Christians like Jay Smith and stuff like that, are trying to say that Yasir Qadhi admits that there's problems with the Quran, that there's problems with the preservation of the Quran. So they're basically saying that Yasir Qadhi is a scholar, and Muslim scholars are saying that the Quran's not preserved, that there's holes in the story of the Quran's preservation and stuff like that. Now, what is this? This is the fallacy of appeal to authority. Just because one scholar says something doesn't mean it's true. Just because Yasir Qadhi says that the Quran's not preserved, that doesn't mean it's conclusively proven that the Quran's not preserved, that the Quran doesn't go back to the companions, or the Quran doesn't go back to the Prophet Muhammad. It doesn't mean that. It's just Yasir Qadhi's own subjective opinion here. Like, did Yasir Qadhi provide any evidence from the manuscripts? No. Did Yasir Qadhi provide any scholarly consensus that agree with him? No. Did Yasir Qadhi show that the manuscripts are not only are they late, but they're not uniform? No, he didn't provide any of that in the interview with Mohammed Ijab. So again, the Christians are taking something and they're just blowing it out of proportion. It would be even if Yasir Qadhi says that the Quran's not preserved and there's problems with the preservation of the Quran and things like that. Even if he says that, he's just one scholar. He's just one scholar saying that. Just because one scholar says something doesn't mean it's conclusively proven that's the case. Same thing with Christianity. Same problem with Christianity. Since we're dealing with Christians are the ones having a field day with this. Well, it can work against them too, right? Christians always accuse me of being inconsistent, yet Christians are the most inconsistent people out there. The argument can also be used against Christianity. I can quote Robert M. Price, Dr. Robert M. Price. And again, keep in mind, Dr. Robert M. Price has two PhDs, one in the New Testament and one in theology. So he knows what he's talking about. He has a PhD in this stuff. He's a scholar. He's a New Testament scholar, a biblical scholar. Robert M. Price concludes that Jesus probably didn't exist. So if I just keep quoting Robert M. Price saying, yeah, the New Testament's corrupt, Jesus didn't exist, none of the it's Paul who corrupted the message of Jesus, yada, yada, yada. If I keep quoting Robert M. Price, Christians wouldn't take me seriously. They would be like, well, despite the fact that he has a PhD, you got to quote other scholars. You got to quote what's the evidence that Robert M. Price is bringing? How come you're not quoting evangelical conservatives? Yada yada yada. So they'll argue against that, saying, how dare you quote Robert M. Price? You got to quote other reputable scholars and stuff like that. Well, same thing here, right? Just because Yasir Qadhi says something, that doesn't mean it's true. Is there any scholar agreeing with him? No scholars agreeing with him. In fact, Shabir Ali, reviewed a book that talked against the preservation of the Quran, and Shabir Ali, Shabir Ali is better than Yasir Qadhi in my opinion. But anyways, Shabir Ali is basically refuting the idea that there were changes in the Quranic manuscripts and things like that. So again, like even Shabir Ali is not agreeing with Yasir Qadhi here. But again, Yasir Qadhi is just one person, one scholar. Just because he says something, that doesn't mean it's conclusively been proven. It's conclusively been proven that the Quran's not preserved, and things like that. So again, scholars actually disagree with Yasir Qadhi's conclusions. They disagree that the Quran's not preserved. The Quran narrative, that the Quran's preservation narrative has holes in it and stuff like that. They disagreed. The non-Muslim academics, keyword here being non-Muslim because they don't have any Muslim axe to grind or whatever, even they agree that the Quran we have is the same Quran that goes back to the Prophet Muhammad. Not only that, but they agree that there was an early there were early manuscripts, and there was an early standardization of the text of the Quran that not only goes back to the companions of the Prophet Muhammad or the disciples of the Prophet Muhammad, but it goes back to the Prophet Muhammad himself. So if you want some quotations, I can provide that. I'll provide that right now. So basically, who are the non-Muslim scholars? Who are the non-Muslim scholars and academics that agree that the Quran goes back to the Prophet Muhammad? It's Brockett, Fred Donner, Montgomery Watt, Richard Bell, and Andrew Rippin. So let's get into the four main reasons that the Quran is preserved according to these non-Muslim scholars and academics. Keyword here being non-Muslim. So there's no textual changes despite the tremendous early period of Islamic governance, the Umayadds, the Abassids, and the Fatmids. The Quranic manuscripts, and this is a key point here, the Quranic manuscripts, the Sunnah manuscripts, and the other manuscripts of the Quran are uniform with corrections made very early to mistakes, most likely scribal error. So all the manuscripts of the Quran are uniform, they're the same. Very early manuscripts are available within 50 years of the death of the Prophet Muhammad or less. So within 50 years of the Prophet Muhammad's death, certainly the Quran was the text of the Quran or Quranic manuscripts containing the 114 chapters of the Quran were certainly in existence. Recitation differences maintain meanings and are known and discussed. So the so-called Aruf and Qira'at, they maintain the meanings and they're known and discussed. So these are just dialectical differences. They don't affect the meaning of the text. What do non-Muslim scholars say about the preservation of the Quran? Again, keep in mind, non-Muslim scholars who have PhDs in Islamic studies and who have studied the Quranic manuscripts in reputable Western universities, not Muslim universities, but Western universities. Let's see what they have to say. Andrew Rippin, in his book, Muslims, Their Religious Beliefs and Practices, page 35, and again, Andrew Rippin has a PhD in Islamic history and theology. He says, in 1972, a treasure trove of ancient manuscripts of the Quran was discovered in Sana'a, Yemen. Certainly, the existence of the manuscripts indicates that the text, or at the very least substantial parts of it, existed in some form of collected form by the 8th century. So 50 years after the death of the Prophet Muhammad, the Quranic manuscripts, or the Quranic manuscripts containing the 114 chapters of the Quran were in existence. Even non-Muslim scholars agree to this, right? So people like Andrew Rippin, Fred Donner, and things like that agree that the Quran we have is the same Quran that goes back to the companions and the Prophet Muhammad, the companions of Prophet Muhammad and Prophet Muhammad, and that these manuscripts are uniform, right? They're the same, they're uniform. So if the Prophet Muhammad was alive and he saw these Sunnah manuscripts and stuff like that, he would approve of it. He would approve that this is the same Quran that was revealed to him. So basically every scholar disagrees with Yasir Qadhi, right? And Yasir Qadhi, of course, didn't show any kind of manuscript issues, or he didn't show where the manuscripts differ, or he didn't show any carbon radiocarbon dating of the manuscripts that show late crystallization of the text and stuff like that. He didn't do any of that. He just said, well, the Quran narrative has no holes in it and stuff like that, as if that proves anything. I can get up on stage and say, we don't have any of the Greek New Testament manuscripts going back to the first period. I can just make that claim. Anybody can make any kind of claim about anything. They need evidence to back it up, and God provided no evidence to support what he was saying. So then the question really arises, what about the early manuscripts of the Quran and things like that? Do we have early manuscripts of the Quran? And the answer is yes. And I'll be posting all my references below. All the pictures of the manuscripts you want to find and things like that, I will be posting it below. But let me show you some pictures of early Quranic manuscripts from a book I have. Let me get. So in this book, The History of the Quranic Text from Revelation to Compilation by Mustafa al-Azami, let's see the early Quranic manuscripts here. So basically in this book, on page 112 to 113, we have, or 112, we have first century manuscripts of the Quran, which show that the manuscripts are uniform, or they're the same, right here. And this is again on page 112, right here. So hopefully you can see it. So basically we have very early Quranic manuscripts dating back to the first century after Hijrah. So the companions of the Prophet Muhammad codicized or collected these manuscripts. So the disciples of the Prophet Muhammad collected these manuscripts and things like that. So this shows that Uthman's copy of the Quran was uniform, or it went back to the Prophet Muhammad's own reading of the Quran. So again, and do non-Muslim academics agree with me? Yes, they do. I'm going to be quoting. So basically, there's somebody. The non-Muslim academics that agree with me would be B. Sagiri and U. Bergman in the academic article, The Codex of a Companion of the Prophet and the Quran of the Prophet, Arabica, 2010, volume 57, number 4, pages 348 to 354. So basically, these scholars, or this scholar, concluded that the script and Furio text belonged to the period of the companions of the Prophet Muhammad, whilst the scripto superior text belonged to the Uthman tradition. And using semantics, the Uthmanic tradition was shown to give the most accurate reproduction of the prophetic prototype. Again, I'll be listing my references below. So basically, that the Quran, the Quranic manuscripts show that these texts go back to the companion of the Prophet Muhammad, or the disciple of the Prophet Muhammad, Uthman. And Uthman's Quran is shown to be the most accurate reproduction of the Prophet Muhammad's Quran. So when the Prophet Muhammad was alive, there was a text of the Quran, there was a manuscript of the Quran. So that manuscript was preserved through Uthman. And then the Uthmanic Quran, which would have been approved by the Prophet Muhammad, is the Quran we have today. So that means that the Quran goes back to the Prophet Muhammad. The Quran is the same. The Quran we have is the same Quran that was delivered by Prophet Muhammad, as even the Western academics, or the Western scholars who have PhDs in Islamic history would agree. Scholars like Fred Donner, Montgomery Watt, Richard Bell, Andrew Rippin, Brockett, etc., etc. I don't know what Brockett's first name is. Let's just call him Brockett. I forgot to mention his first name here. But again, Fred Donner, Montgomery Watt, Richard Bell, and Andrew Rippin agree that the manuscripts are not only are the manuscripts early, but they're uniform. They're the same, unlike the New Testament, where none of the manuscripts are the same. And that the Quran we have is the same Quran that was authorized by not only Uthman but the Prophet Muhammad. So this, and even the mode of the Quran wasn't like the Quranic, the Muslim tradition has always been through memorization, oral form. It wasn't like written form. Like the Quran was revealed as an oral message, and a message that was memorized by not only the Prophet Muhammad but by the disciples of the Prophet Muhammad, Uthman, Abu Bakr, Umar, Ubay, Ibn Masud, etc., etc. So the Quran was revealed as a memorized and oral text. It wasn't revealed as a written text. Like the New Testament was revealed as a written text. It wasn't revealed as some oral tradition. Even though if you read the Gospels of Matthew and Mark and stuff like that, it says Jesus was preaching the gospel of the kingdom. So what is that gospel? Who knows what the gospel of Jesus was? But the gospel the Gospels of the New Testament were written down. It wasn't revealed as an oral message. It was revealed, or the New Testament was written down. Now, whether the New Testament authors were inspired by God or whether they were making things up, who knows? It seems like the New Testament authors were making things up about Jesus. But anyway, that's just my theory. But the New Testament was first imagined, or it was first introduced as a written text. The Quran was introduced as an oral message. So the Quran was the mode of revelation is different from the Quran in the New Testament. So the Muslim tradition is through memorization and oral message. It's not through writing. It's not through writing manuscripts. But regardless, even if you want to go the manuscript route, the manuscripts, according to even non-Muslim academics, according to non-Muslim scholars, goes back to Uthman, and the Uthman Quran goes back to the Prophet Muhammad and things like that. And we might be saying, well, what about Ubay? What about Ibn Masud? Ibn Masud later on agreed with Uthman. We have evidence for that. And Ubay's Quran is the same as Uthman's Quran. This Ubay thing, the Ubay having a different Quran, is false. And I'll be providing the references below, or I'll make another video about that. That's a longer topic. But again, just because Yasir Qadhi says that the Quran's not preserved, that doesn't mean the Quran's not preserved. He needs, even despite all his education, despite all his misgivings and stuff like that, he still needs to provide evidence for his claims. He can't just get up there, say the Quran's not preserved, and just sit back down. I mean, I'm not going to listen to him unless he provides evidence for what he's saying. Shabir Ali is at least providing evidence for his claims. He's providing scholarly evidence. He's going through the manuscript traditions and stuff like that. What is Yasir Qadhi doing? He's doing none of that. He's just spitting out his own subjective reasoning. And when that gets him in hot water, he keeps jumping up and down doing some kind of damage control. And when David Wood and Jay Smith and stuff like that are exploiting his stupidity, Yasir Qadhi's stupidity, what does Yasir Qadhi do? He files copyright complaints just to get it down, just to save himself a further embarrassment. Right? Same thing with James White. When James White tries to say stupid things and things like that against Bart Ehrman and things like that, and when he's utterly humiliated by Bart Ehrman, he goes into damage control mode. Same thing with Yasir Qadhi. So again, the moral of the story is, just because one Muslim scholar says something, that doesn't, unless he provides evidence, that doesn't mean it's true. Any Muslim scholar can get up and say anything they want. So if Yasir Qadhi's having his doubts, about Islam and the Quran's preservation and stuff like that, that's his problem. That's not our problem. How is that our problem? Unless he's providing evidence for his claims, right? So Yasir Qadhi's just one voice in the wilderness. Let's just say he's just one scholar saying things. It doesn't mean what he's saying is true, right? This is why I don't take Yasir. I take Shabir Ali more seriously than Yasir Qadhi. That's just me personally. I think Shabir Ali is the better scholar. But again, that's just my opinion. But the moral of the story is, when a scholar says something, do not believe it unless they provide evidence. It doesn't matter if it's a Christian scholar, Muslim scholar, New Testament scholar, biblical scholar, whatever scholar it is, unless they provide evidence for what they're saying, don't believe it, right? So that's basically all I wanted to say about the David Wood and Yasir Qadhi drama. Just because, again, David Wood and Jay Smith and people like him, or committing what's called the fallacy of appeal to authority. Just because Yasir Qadhi is a scholar and he says something, that doesn't mean what he's saying is true, unless he provides irrefutable evidence to back up his claims. Did he provide that? No. Did David Wood provide evidence that the Quran manuscripts were altered and the Quran radiocarbon dating of the Quran doesn't go back to the disciples' time or the companions of the Prophet's time, etc., etc.? No, he didn't provide any of that. He's just spewing out his own subjective reasoning on the Quranic manuscripts. I can do that with the New Testament. I can say the New Testament doesn't go back to the first century. Thus, whatever we have, whatever manuscripts we have in the New Testament, not only does not represent the early Christian believers, what they believed about Jesus, but it's been horribly altered. It's been horribly changed. It's been changed to the point where we can never know what Jesus actually said and did. And that's what the Jesus Seminar says. The Jesus Seminar says that 82% of what Jesus says is not what he really said. It's made up by the authors of the New Testament. So would Christians take me seriously if I keep quoting the Jesus Seminar, if I keep quoting Robert and Price? No, they would be like, "Where's your evidence? How come no other evangelical scholar agrees with you?" Et cetera. So they'll bring that up. Well, same thing here. No Muslim scholar agrees with Yasir Qadhi. No non-Muslim scholar agrees with Yasir Qadhi. Yasir Qadhi didn't bring any kind of manuscript evidence to show that the Quran's been changed or altered, or the Quran or radiocarbon dating of the Quran doesn't go back to the first century after Hijrah. Yasir Qadhi did not provide any evidence to support that the Quran's been altered or changed by scribes, in the second century onwards and things like that. He provided none of that. He just said that the standard story of the Quran has holes in it. What does he mean by that? I don't know. And to be honest, I don't really care. So this is just my 2 cents on this whole David Wood Yasir Qadhi nonsense. So so whenever I'm bored and there's nothing to watch on Netflix, I always watch David Wood videos because they're always entertaining. Because how much bullshit he actually says. But anyways, this is just my 2 cents on this whole thing. Stay tuned. A lot more videos are up ahead. Thanks a lot.